are starting at step number 20. I have an interior zipper pocket panel. You want that wrong side up with a 15-inch edge at the top for the large bag. If you're making the small bag, you'll have a 12-inch edge at the top. And then you want to draw a rectangle that measures 10 inches wide. Oh, I'm sorry, 14 inches wide by 1/2 inch tall for large bag. Yeah, we're going to make that actually 13 inches wide. So you want to start 1 inch from the end and 1 inch down from the top. And draw the line to 1 inch from the other end. And then 1/2 inch below that line, you will draw another line that is also 13 inches long. And then connect the lines at the end. So we have a box. Now I'm going to finger press this lining pocket panel, interior zipper pocket panel, in half so that I can find the center. And you want to take one of your lining panels, right side up. I'll finger press that as well in half to find the center. Okay, so now you can see the center along each of the pieces, and you will place this 1 inch from the top and centered. So just make sure at the top and the bottom that that center line matches up, and then I'll just go ahead and pin this in place. Okay. Now, using a shorter stitch length, so I think I'll put it on a length of 3. Okay. Oh, I need to change my foot back. I was using my zipper foot at the end of the last video. Okay, so I have just my regular narrow foot on that I use all the time. Okay, sorry about that. All right, now you will stitch directly along the box that you drew. Back stitch at the beginning, and you're just stitching right on top of that line, all the way around the box. Alright, and then when you get to the end, make sure you stop at the corner with your needle down, and then lift your presser foot and rotate the bag. So up the 1/2 inch at the end, making sure you stop right in the corner with your needle down again, and then pivot. and rotate one last time. And then when I get back to the beginning of my stitching, I'll just back stitch again to secure there. Trim all my threads. All right, now I'm going to remove these pins. And right in the middle of the box that we just sewed around, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line right down the center that stops about 1/2 inch from each end. So this is 1/4 inch in from one of the long straight sewn edges. And then from the end of that center line, you will draw a line to each of the corners. I don't usually even draw the lines on. I'll just cut it with my rotary cutter on my mat. Alright, so then once you have that line drawn, just go ahead and cut. I'm going to snip a little part in the center to get it started. And then you'll just cut through both layers of fabric. So through the pocket fabric and the lining fabric. And you'll just cut right along that line in the center. And then when you get to that triangle at the ends, you'll just cut right into the corner of the stitching, just being careful not to clip any of the stitches. And you do that in the other corner, and then on the other end as well. Now I'm going to go to my ironing board and pull this pocket fabric through that rectangle and press it flat to the wrong side. So we'll just have a rectangle opening. Okay, I pressed that nice and flat. The interior zipper pocket panel is pressed wrong sides together with the lining main panel. And there you have your rectangle opening, which is where the zipper is going to go. Okay, so I like to take my zipper, which you want a 13-inch zipper. I don't think they typically come in 13-inch lengths, so this is 14-inch, and then we'll just trim some of the end off after it's sewed. So I like to use Elmer's washable school glue stick. So last year my son was in 3rd grade and I had to buy 27 glue sticks or something, and he brings home about 20 of them. So I just take them all for my sewing room. So I just go right along the edge of the pocket, and this dries clear. So if any of it's out of the seam allowance, you won't see it once it's dry. But I'm just going right along the rectangle opening, and I try to put it on heavy enough that it's going to hold the zipper in place. Try to be as neat as possible. Alright. I want my zipper to zip close toward the left side. Let me actually unzip that a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to put the zipper stop just inside the end of the rectangle. And then I'll end up flipping this over and positioning it from the other side. You just make sure it's nice and even. The zipper kind of has like lines on the zipper tape that I use. Just try to make sure I keep everything straight. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to grab my ruler now, and I just press down with the ruler over the zipper. It seems to help it stick. Maybe it's in my head, I don't know. All right, so now I'm going to switch to a longer stitch length, and then very carefully slide this under my sewing machine. That glue stick's not permanent, so I mean it holds it in place long enough to kind of get it to your sewing machine and get it sewed on, but just be gentle with it. Do a couple of stitches and then back stitch. Okay. And then just stitch all the way around the zipper, around the rectangle, using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Remember to stop at the corners always with your needle down. You can see my zippers are falling away here from the fabric. So I'm just going to make sure when I get up here to this end, the very end of the zipper kind of came unstuck when I was, while it was hanging over the edge here. So I'm just going to double check to make sure that I have things placed correctly. And it helps just to eyeball it with those lines on the zipper tape. Okay, and then finally, I'm back around to where you began. And then just back stitch a couple stitches. Alright, so now that the zipper is fully installed and top stitched and my bobbin is full, you will take the other interior zipper pocket panel and place it right sides together with the one that's already attached. Oh, oops. Grab some clips. And now you will clip together just the pocket panels, not the lining. We'll trim this off after we sew it together, the extra zipper. So if your zippers needs to be 13 inches or longer for the large, and I believe 10 inches or longer for the small. Okay, so now flip it over so that the lining panel is right side up, and then fold the lining panel back and you'll just stitch along here. through the zipper panels only using a 1/2" seam allowance. I'll use a 3.5 stitch length for that. And I'm leaving the bottom open, so I'm just stitching up one side. And then I'll pivot at the top and go along the top edge. Again, folding that lining panel back out of the way. Okay, and then I'm actually going to trim the seam allowance here, and the reason why I'm doing that is because at the end, once you've finished everything, you'll turn the edges of this under by 1/2", and it's a lot easier to press that if the seam allowance has been trimmed down to about 1/8 of an inch. Careful here in case the little metal bits of the zipper are, see they're right in there, so you don't want to cut over that. And make sure the whole time you're trimming this that you're folding your lining panel back out of the way. All right, and then finally trim that side. Okay. So now that that is all trimmed, if you put a tag inside of your bags, you might want to sew that on now before we proceed. Let me trim the side of this inner facing off. So now you will place your, oh, and also if you wanted to add any slip pockets to the inside for your phone or anything, now would be the time to do that. And you can do that on this other panel or even right here in front of the zipper panel or the zipper pocket. So now we'll place these two lining panels right sides together, and you're just matching up the raw edges. And we want to, let's see, we're going to pin along each of the side edges or clip. Got a little extra interfacing there at the top. I like to trim that just to keep everything nice, so I'm following my seam allowances properly. Okay, and then we'll be using a 1/2" seam allowance here. I've got my stitch length on 3 1/2. oh wait, actually we're going to start at 1/2 inch seam allowance just at the very top, and then gradually increase that to 5/8 of an inch. So my sewing machine does not have a 5/8 mark, but I just go to a little bit past the 1/2 mark. And this will just make the lining sit down inside the exterior nicer. And my thread broke, I think. Let's see. Not sure what my thread's doing here. There's nice weather and there's a lot of kids playing outside, but I don't know. It sounds like a lot of yelling. Okay. Stitch this side at 1/2 inch at the top and then increase to 5/8. So the top is only a 1/2 inch for the first like 1/2 inch, and then you increase to 5/8 inch seam allowance. And now I want to trim that seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. I'm definitely going to order new scissors soon, I think. Now we want to assemble this with the bottom the same way that we did with the exterior. I'm going to right now, so I don't forget, open up this lining zipper pocket. We need that to be open at the end when we finish the bag. So right now I will press this in half, bringing the two sides together. And I'm just going to finger press that in the middle at the very bottom and mark the bottom along the center. And I'll do it with my chalk pencil on the black interfacing. Okay, and then the other ends are marked at the center where the seam is. I'm also just going to mark the center of the tops now because that's helpful at the end when you assemble the lining in the exterior. Alright, let me grab my bottom panel. Alright, I'm going to mark the centers on this bottom panel as well. I could use the pattern piece like I did for the exterior, but I find it just as easy to fold it and finger press to mark the centers. Only since this panel does not have any firm stabilizer attached to it. Since the exterior panel did, it was much easier to use the pattern piece. Okay. The light makes it hard to see where the centers are. Okay. So now I've got each of the 4 centers marked here, and then the centers are marked along the bottom edge of my bag. So I will get some clips. Alright, and I'm going to place the bottom panel inside the lining panel so it's right side together. And mark the center, or match the centers up on one long edge, and I'm going to just put a few clips in there. And then on the other side, I'll do the same. So match the center of the other long edge of the bottom panel up with the center mark on the other lining panel, and put a few clips on that side. All right, and then the lining, or the short ends, you'll mark with the or match up with the side seam. So I'm just going to place one clip there and then work my way around back to the side. And we're going to be sewing this at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. You have to ease the edges or the corners in a little bit. Close my blinds real quick. Okay, and then I'll match the center of this end up with the other side seam. I'll clip once at that seam. Hang on 1 minute. Alright, let's finish pinning the lining bottom panel in place. And we will sew this on using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And just keep your zipper pocket out of the way. Oh my goodness. There's kids bouncing basketballs outside, and I feel like I'm gonna turn into the scary old neighbor lady that my mom used to tell me about that would pop their balls if it went in their yard. It's not who I want to be, is it? My clips are starting to get fragile and break. It's the actual Wonder Clip brand. Most of my clips are generic off Amazon, and they really seem stronger, but I don't know if it's just because they're newer. I don't honestly know where all these kids that are playing in my street even live, because unless they just moved in, they definitely do not live down my street. Alright. The entire bottom panel sewn in. You can give it a look over to make sure that you haven't puckered the fabric at all, because if you do, you want to fix that before you trim the seam allowance. And now you'll just go ahead and trim that seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch as well. Alright, so now we have the entire lining assembled. Now we'll just have to put the zipper into the top of the bag. I don't know if I should make that a separate video. Put the zipper in and then attach the lining and the exterior. Close the pocket and attach the handle. So let's see where we're at. 33 minutes. Okay, we'll just keep on going. So here's the lining finished. I'm going to turn the lining right side out, which is how I put the bag together at the end. And make sure that you have this zipper unzipped. You want the zipper pocket open. Alright, so we will take now our zipper. You want, I believe, a 20-inch zipper. Let me confirm that. Let's see, we'll go with maybe 21 inches. I think that'd be safe. And again, the pattern has not been finalized yet, so I will make sure that the pattern has the correct measurement in it. Alright, and I have a zipper pull, and I'm just going to separate the end and then slide on the zipper pull. So it's the separated end that goes on first. And then just push it on like that. If you get it off a little bit, like if the teeth aren't lined up properly, I always pay attention to, like, this side has the tooth that will be first, and then this tooth comes next. So if you get it wrong, you'll get like a weird lump on one side. Alright, so I just look into the end part to make sure I have it in there right. Alright, see. So we are going to measure on, nope, not yet. Okay, we're going to make the zipper tab. So we need to, this is my zipper tab fabric. We are going to press the long raw edges of the zipper tab toward the wrong side by 1/2 inch. Long raw edges are these two. So my easiest way of pressing something 1/2 inch a certain way, I'm going to use my ruler and make a 1 inch mark here, and then a 1 inch mark here. And then I will press the raw end straight to that line I just drew on both sides. Okay, so I just pressed my whole entire tab. the long edges go under by 1/2 inch, press, and then press each of the short folded ends up by 1/2 inch, and then fold the whole tab in half. So now all of the raw edges are enclosed in the center. You will find the closed edge of your zipper and insert it into the tab. And then you'll just clip that on. I'm just going to put a couple tabs here at the end. All right, and then we just want to sew all the way around the tab. Make sure I have it even. I sewed across the zipper, and now up one side, across the folded edge, and then back down the other folded side to the beginning of my stitches. And of course I back stitch at the start and stop. Trim my threads. Okay. I don't want to throw my clips away. So now we've got our zipper tab attached. Here's the open end of the zipper. I'm going to leave that still closed for now. Well, it doesn't matter. Okay. So now what we want to do is on the exterior side panel. Just drop things all over the floor. Let me turn my bag. I turned it right side out so I like just admire it, I guess. Okay, so my bag should be inside out still. The right side, wrong side out, whatever. Okay, now from this seam on the side panel, I'm using a smaller ruler for this. Okay, we want to measure from that seam 1 1/4 inch and then make a mark just within the seam allowance. This is a chalk pencil, so if it's over, that will be okay. And then another mark, 1 1/4 inch, and then do the same on the other side panels. If you're making the small bag, this mark will be 1 inch from that seam, and this is the seam that attaches the side panel to the center panels. So 1 1/4 inch, and then one more, 1 1/4 inch. Okay, so I have all those marks. Alright, to have the zipper properly placed on the bag, we will need to mark placement marks along the zipper. So you'll measure from the open end 1 inch and make a mark, and make sure these marks are even on both sides of the zipper tape. It's very important to keep your zipper even as you sew it on. Second mark will be at 7 3/4 of an inch. And then the third mark will be at 14 1/2 inches. And that's for the large bag. If you are making the small bag, those measurements will be 1 inch, 6 inches, and then 11 inches for the last. Okay, so now you want to, you could unzip it or leave it zipped. Let's leave it zipped first till we get it on. Get ready. So grab some clips. I'm going on the right side of the bag that already has the zipper pocket attached. With the zipper face down, I have my 1.25 inch mark that I made previously there. And I'm going to match that up exactly with the 1 inch mark that I just made on the zipper. And I'm going to clip at that one spot. Okay, let's see. It's right at that 1 inch, and then right at that, the 1 inch mark is at this side of my clip. And then I'm going to fold the zipper tape back 90 degrees right at that mark. And I'm just going to place another clip there. If you see, it comes off the top of the bag, and then we'll sew over that so that that raw edge is not exposed. And now we just want to continue down the length of the zipper along the top edge of the bag. Your second mark should line up with the center mark on the bag. The most important thing is to keep everything even. Don't stretch your bag as you sew the zipper on, so that you don't end up with a wavy zipper. This is hard to pin it this way, or clip it. I always say pin it, whether I'm clipping or pinning. I'm just kind of readjusting some of this down here. Some of what I do on camera is easier for me to do a different way, but I'd rather not have myself on camera. All right. So I'm just going to continue clipping the zipper onto the top of the bag. The other mark will line up with that last mark. And I'm just going to place a clip just inside of that line or that mark, and then clip in between. All right, and then this end of the zipper will be tucked down into the bag, and then you'll just sew over it like that, so that at the end it has a little zipper tail. Okay, so now I go to the beginning of my zipper, and I'm just going to base this on using a 1/8 inch seam allowance at first. So first I sew over that part that I folded back 90 degrees. And I'm just using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And you can use a longer stitch length on this, since you will be sewing it again at a 1/4 inch seam allowance when you attach it to the lining. So now just sew all the way along the zipper. And I use an 1/8 inch seam allowance here so that you don't have stitching visible on the zipper when you finish your bag. I actually really like the way this knit fabric is very slouchy, like a hobo bag should be. So I think it's really kind of perfect for this. All right, and then that brings us right to that other mark. And the zipper tape will fold down into the bag there. So you'll just sew right off the edge of it. right where it folds in, as so, just like that. All right, I'll trim that part of the zipper off when we're done. Okay, so now you want to flip this over, and this is why it's important to have those marks match up, because you want your zipper to be even so that your front and center seams line up when the bag is zipped closed. It's pretty important. So I'm going to find my first mark from the closed end of the zipper and line it up with that first 1.25 inch mark on the bag and clip just inside of that mark. Okay, so then that's where I'll start sewing. And then I'm just going to pin along the length of the zipper. Make sure that you don't have your zipper tape twisted. It's still wrong side of the zipper down to the right side of the bag. I'm going to go ahead right now and line up the center mark and clip that in place. And my last 1 inch mark, I'm going to clip that in place just so that everything is properly lined up so that it will be even on both sides of my bag. And then I'm just going to clip everything in between. This is so hard from this angle. I don't know what would make it easier. Probably not this. Okay. I think soon I may redo some of my first patterns. At least redo the videos for those. I didn't know how to edit them or anything when I first started. Okay, and then the very end of this zipper, you want to pin it just inside that mark, or clip it, and then fold back at a 90-degree angle right at that mark that you made, and pin in place like that. Okay, so I will start sewing now from this end. So right at that mark, I'll fold the end of the zipper down into the bag. And start sewing using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. I'm getting a headache. Trim the threads. All right, now it wouldn't be a bad idea at this point. Let's see, I'll just do it. Flip your bag right side out. And the zipper will be a little bit weird to work since it's not stitched through all the way. but just zip it up and just make sure that your front and back seams match along the zipper. So all right, now turn your bag back inside out. All right, now I'm going to place the lining inside. Make sure that your zipper pocket is open. Place the lining right sides together to the right side of the exterior. Tuck the zipper down in between. All right, so now I have my center mark that I made along the top. When I was marking the centers of the bottom, I'll just match that to the center seam on the exterior. And I'm going to just place a couple clips there. Flip it over. Do the same on that side. All right, and then I'm going to match the ends up, the center seam on the end. And remember, your handle connectors will extend past the bag by 1/4 of an inch. And the ends of your zipper will stick out, and that's fine. Just pin over those. We'll trim that off when we trim the, no, we're not going to trim the seam allowance, but we'll trim that off when we, after we sew this together. So then when we sew this seam, we will use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And that end of the zipper is hanging down inside the bag. So just make sure it's folded down in there. And you'll just sew right across the end of that when you sew it together. Alright, so just don't forget that when you sew this together, this is a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Because the zipper's there. So if you were to use 1/2 inch, you'll probably sew your zipper right into it. Okay. Again, make sure you have that lining zipper pocket open. 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to use a shorter stitch length, 3.5. And just take your time and sew all the way around the top opening of the bag. And right now you're sewing through the lining fabric, the zipper, and the exterior. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish sewing all the way around this. I will back stitch over the ends where I have the handle connectors. It's not a bad idea to give them a little extra security. So I usually back stitch when I sew over those, and I will be back. Okay, so I sewed all the way around the top of my bag. I'm going to trim just the ends of the zipper off here. And now I will turn the bag right side out through the hole in the bottom of the lining pocket. So that's why it was so important to make sure that zipper was unzipped. So I'm just going to pull everything right through that hole, which should be super easy because this is a pretty big pocket. Right now I'm going to just tuck this whole pocket down inside. Everything is going to be the right way. So I want the exterior side facing out, lining side facing in. Just really make sure everything's nice and flipped. Going to zip that pocket closed for now. I'm going to go over to my iron and I'm just going to press the seam really well. So I just make sure that it's completely turned. Pull the connectors out. I'll be careful to not touch my connectors with the iron since they are vinyl. But you're just going to press all the way around the top of the bag. Okay, I have that top seam pressed well, and now I'm going to turn the entire bag inside out. If you have a sewing machine with a drop arm, you could just remove that part and stitch like that. I always top stitch my bags inside out. Hopefully I have enough bobbin thread. I think I should. Long stitch length. I'm going to start my top stitch on the back side of the bag toward the end, so my back stitch won't be like right in the middle front center or something. Alright, and I'm just going to use a 1/8 inch seam allowance again to top stitch. So I just do a couple stitches first and then back stitch. Alright. Now I just will make sure as I'm going along that the exterior and lining are both fully pulled away from the zipper. And I just take my time and use a nice even 1/8 inch seam allowance. You get near the top of the connector, you'll pivot with your needle down. I also look for any stray threads that I need to clip and just kind of clip them as I go if I see any. Alright, and this part might be a little thick, so hand crank your machine if you need to. Hand crank where needed. Okay. And back down to where I started sewing and back stitch. Okay. Oops. So I want to trim my threads. I'm going to flip the whole bag back right side out again. So the zipper looks wavy right now when it's unzipped, but it shouldn't once everything is pushed down. The way the zipper, when it's closed, the way it lays, it shouldn't look like that. Okay. So I'm going to, right now, I'm going to tuck that end in there. I'm going to pull the pocket lining out of the bag. Alright, I'm going to go to my iron and I'm going to press this in by 1/2 inch all the way around, and then we'll just top stitch that closed. Okay, I have the ends of the lining pocket panel folded inside by 1/2 inch. I pressed that nice and flat, and now I'm just going to top stitch that closed right along the folded edge using a 1/8 inch seam allowance, or it can be even less, just right along the edge. This is really such a huge pocket. Alright, so we'll push that down inside. Okay, zip the lining pocket closed. Make sure the whole entire lining is pressed down inside well. You can press your bag if it's wrinkly and needs pressing. Let's zip this closed and see how it looks. Without the handle attached yet, but it's nice and big and floppy, like a hobo bag should be. I'll probably stuff it with some fabric to get the pictures. So now the very last step is you take your strap, and then you want to, at the ironing board, obviously you would press, I can't press this again because it's vinyl. You'll press one edge under by 1/2 inch. Okay, that video cut off before it was finished. So what you do is press the edge under by 1/2 inch and then another 1 inch, and then slip it onto the rectangle ring, and then you stitch one time closest to the folded edge and then another time closest to the hardware. I may adjust the length of this strap. It looks a little bit long for the large bag. If I do, I'll put a pop-up text thing over the video where I tell you the length of that, and then obviously it will be different in the finished pattern. So I hope you enjoyed the videos. I hope you'll share your bags in my Facebook group and on Instagram. Enjoy.